My life, for a very long time, was measured by the precise timetable of the commuter train. The 6:15 a.m. train from our rented house in the crowded suburbs of DePoke was the one that would get me to my desk in the city just before my boss arrived. The 7:45 p.m. train was the one that would get me home just in time to read a story to my daughter, Sari, before she fell asleep. My wife, Rina, and I were a team, a well-oiled machine running on a carefully managed budget and a shared dream of one day buying a small piece of this concrete world for ourselves. Our life was small, but it was ours. It was contained in the sound of Sadi's laughter, the smell of the instant coffee Rina would have waiting for me in the morning, and the quiet relief of making it to the end of another month with our finances intact. I was a junior procurement officer for a national manufacturing company. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was honest, and I was good at it. I understood value, I understood logistics, and I understood that a promise made to a supplier had to be a promise kept. It was a simple, honorable code that I thought applied to everything in life. The world outside of our small unit was my parents' house in Bekasi. It felt in many ways like the headquarters of a family I was only a satellite member of. Every other weekend, we would make the pilgrimage, navigating the traffic-clogged arteries of the city, our car filled with groceries and a sense of filial duty. My father was a quiet man, retired and set in his ways. My mother was the family's emotional core, and the gravity of her world had a single, massive center, my nephew, Rio. Rio was the son of my older brother, Dimas, and his ex-wife, Maya. Their marriage had been a brief, chaotic mistake, but it had produced the one thing my parents craved more than anything, a grandson to carry on the family name. And in their eyes, this made Maya, the ex-wife, a permanent fixture, a de facto queen. It didn't matter that Maya was, to put it mildly, completely useless. She had no job, no ambition, and the parenting skills of a stray cat. Rio was perpetually dressed in slightly dirty, expensive-looking clothes and spent most of his days parked in front of my parents' television while Maya was out with her friends. She was a parasite, but she had performed the one miracle that mattered, and for that she was revered. Our visits were a painful, predictable ritual. My daughter Sari would try to show her grandmother a drawing she had made, and my mother would give it a distracted glance before calling out, "Rio, come show Nene how you play that game on your tablet." Rina would help my mother in the kitchen for hours, only to hear her sigh and say, "It's so wonderful how Maya lets me cook for Rio. She knows a growing boy needs his grandmother food." They were masters of the passive-aggressive compliment, the veiled comparison that always left Rina and I feeling like we were a franchise of the main family, a lesser brand. We endured it, because that's what you do. You smile, you tell yourself they don't mean it, you tell yourself that blood is thicker than your own quiet resentment. You tell yourself this over and over until one day the universe decides to show you just how thin your blood really is. That day for us came with a fever. It started at dusk, a warmth on Sadi's forehead that by midnight had become a raging fire. We rushed her to the nearest hospital, our hearts pounding in rhythm with the screeching ambulance siren. The diagnosis was the one every parent in this city dreads: dengue hemorrhagic fever, DBD. Her platelet count was plummeting. The next few days were a blur of beeping machines, hushed conversations with doctors, and the smell of antiseptic. The hospital bills began to pile up, a stack of white paper that represented every rupiah Rina and I had saved painstakingly. By the fourth day, our savings were gone. I was staring at a new bill, a figure with so many zeros that had made my vision swim. Panicked, my mind running on caffeine and fear, I did the one thing I thought I could do. I stepped into the sterile quiet of the hospital corridor and called my father. I explained the situation, my voice cracking with a shame I couldn't suppress. I wasn't asking for a gift, just a loan. Enough to cover us until my salary came in at the end of the month. "Please, Buck, we're in trouble." His voice on the other end was flat, devoid of the alarm I expected. "We can't, Fajar," he said. There was no apology, just a statement. "We have no money. The house needs a big repair on the roof. It's going to be very expensive. We have nothing to spare." He didn't ask to speak to Sari. He didn't ask which hospital she was in. He just repeated, "We have nothing," and ended the call. I stood in that hallway, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. I had been weighed, measured, and found wanting. I went back into the room, told Rena they couldn't help, and then I sold my wedding ring and my late grandfather's watch to a man in a small shop near the hospital. It was just enough. 2 days later, Sadi's fever broke. Her platelets started to climb. The storm had passed. We brought her home, our bank account empty, but our hearts full. That evening, Rena was quietly scrolling through her phone, finding some numb comfort in the mindless lives of others. Suddenly, she made a small, sharp sound, a gasp of disbelief. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just handed me the phone. On the screen was a public post from Maya, a photo album. The first picture of my mother and father, grinning from ear to ear, standing on a white sand beach with their arms around Rio. The photos that followed were of them on a jet ski, eating at a seafood restaurant overlooking the ocean, and posing in front of the door of a luxury hotel suite. It was a full weekend getaway to a resort in Anyar. The caption, posted just 2 days ago, the same day my father had told me they had nothing, read, "Surprise weekend getaway from the world's best grandparents, making memories with my little prince." The roof wasn't leaking. The house was fine. The money was not tied up. It had been spent on a luxury holiday for the woman my brother had divorced and the grandson who had replaced my daughter. I looked at the picture of my parents smiling, the sun shining on their faces, and I felt something break inside of me. It was the sound of a son's heart hitting the cold, hard floor of reality. They didn't have nothing to spare. They just had nothing to spare for me. End of part 1.
The weeks following Sari's recovery were quiet. The photograph from that beach resort lived in the back of my mind, a silent, festering wound that Rena and I never spoke about directly. There was no point. Voicing the betrayal would be like describing the air itself. It was all around us now, a permanent change in the atmosphere of our family. We didn't receive a single call from my parents asking how Sari was doing. As far as they were concerned, the crisis had never happened. Their world and their priorities remained undisturbed. Instead, we poured ourselves into rebuilding. We worked harder, took on extra projects, and slowly began to refill the cavernous hole in our savings. We built a wall around our little family, a wall made of shared jokes, bedtime stories, and the quiet understanding that we were, in the truest sense of the word, on our own. The problem with a wound like that, however, is that you forget it's there. Life returns to a semblance of normal, and you start to believe that maybe, just maybe, you imagined the depth of the cut. You start making excuses for the people who hurt you. They're old. They don't think things through. It wasn't malicious. It is the comforting lie the heart tells the brain to keep the family unit from shattering. We were living that lie as Sari's 6th birthday approached. For a 6-year-old, a birthday is not just a day. It is the absolute center of their universe. And for Sari, her only wish was to have a party at the local fried chicken franchise, the one with the smiling cartoon bee and the brightly colored slides. It was an extravagance for us, a ridiculous expense that would set our savings back. But looking at her hopeful, shining eyes, Rena and I knew we had to make it happen. We booked the party room, sent out invitations to our little friends from kindergarten, and prepared for the big day. "Will Kakek and Nenek come?" Sari asked me one night, her voice small in the darkness of her room. "Will they bring Rio?" I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Of course they will, Sayang, I said, the lie tasting like poison. They wouldn't miss it. The following weekend, Rena and I drove to Bekasi to issue the formal invitation. We went through the motions of a normal family visit, drinking the weak, sugary tea my mother always served, and listening to a long, rambling story about a new expensive toy my father had just bought for Rio. Maya was there, as always, scrolling blankly on her phone while Rio ran amok. So, I began, forcing a cheerful tone, we wanted to invite you all to Sari's 6th birthday party next Saturday. It's at the chicken place near our house. It would mean the world to her if you were there. My mother smiled, a placid, distant smile. Oh, how nice, a party. Of course we will try to come. You know how busy we are with the boy. But they promised. They looked at a picture Sari had drawn of the whole family at her party, and they promised they would be there. For the entire week, that was all she could talk about. Rena bought her a new dress, a simple but pretty one, with yellow flowers on it. Every morning she would ask, "Is it my party today?" The day of the party was bright and hot. The room at the restaurant was a riot of color and noise, filled with 6-year-olds high on sugar and excitement. Rena was a whirlwind of motion, organizing games, handing out party hats, her face flushed with a determined sort of joy. I stood near the entrance, a strained smile plastered on my face, my eyes flicking to the glass door every time a new car pulled into the parking lot. One by one, the parents of Sari's friends arrived, dropping off their kids with smiles and well wishes. The room filled up. The games started. The music played. And Sari, in between bouts of gleeful screaming with her friends, would run to me, her new dress swishing around her knees. "Where are they, Aya?" she'd ask, her little face clouded with the first hint of worry. "Will they bring Rio?" "They're on their way, sweetheart," I'd lie, checking my phone for the 10th time. No missed calls, no messages. I tried calling my father. It rang and rang unanswered. I tried my mother, straight to voicemail. The party continued. The kids ate their fried chicken. They scrambled up the slide. The moment came for the cake, a small, brightly frosted thing with 6 candles. As Sari's friends gathered around her, singing the birthday song, I saw her give one last long look towards the empty doorway. The hope in her eyes finally flickered and died, replaced with a quiet, profound disappointment that no 6-year-old should ever have to feel. She blew out the candles, but the smile she gave us was a fragile, trembling thing. They never came. That night, after tucking a very quiet and subdued little girl into bed, Rena finally broke down. She sat on our sofa and sobbed, a storm of anger and hurt that she had held back all day for our daughter's sake. How could they do that to her, Fajar? How could they be so cruel? She wept. I held her, offering no answers because there were no answers left. There was nothing left to say. There were no more excuses to make. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a choice. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was breezy, almost cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "Fajar," she said, "we are so sorry about yesterday. Something came up." I waited, my hand clenched into a fist. I was ready for the lie. An emergency, a sudden sickness, anything. "What came up, Boo?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Oh, whatever you do, don't ask my father for the permits. He has lost them all again." "It was just one of those things," she said vaguely. "We completely forgot about Sari's party. Our minds have just been so full preparing for Rio's Khitan next month. We were running around all day looking at catering options and booking a hall. You know how important a boy's circumcision ceremony is. It's a huge milestone. We have to make it perfect for him." And there it was. Not a forgotten promise, but a reprioritized one. My daughter's birthday, her little heart waiting by the door, was an insignificant speck of dust compared to the grand, important future of their grandson. They hadn't just forgotten, they had replaced her. They had looked at two family events, one happening now and one happening a month in the future, and had decided, consciously or not, that my daughter and I and her happiness did not matter. I stood there in the quiet of my living room, the morning sun streaming through the window, and I felt the last bit of warmth in my heart for them turn to ice. An apology would have been an insult. An excuse would have been a joke. What she offered was the plain, unvarnished truth of my family's new hierarchy. And in it, my daughter and I were at the very bottom. "I see," I said. It was all I could manage to get out. "Don't worry," she continued, completely oblivious. "We'll send a gift for Sari later this week." "Don't bother," I said, and I ended the call. That was the moment the old Fajar died. The son who tried, the son who hoped, the son who made excuses. He bled out on the floor of a fried chicken restaurant surrounded by cheap decorations and the ghost of a 6-year-old's disappointment. The man who was left with someone colder, quieter, and much, much stronger. The son was gone. The father and husband was all that remained. And he would never, ever let his family wait by the door for anyone else. End of part 2.
The aftermath of Sari's birthday was not an explosion. It was a change in atmospheric pressure. In the space once occupied by hope and filial duty, a hard vacuum formed. Rina and I didn't have a big, dramatic discussion about cutting my parents off. We didn't need to. A switch had been flipped. We had spent years trying to paddle our little family canoe upstream, fighting the current of their indifference. Now we simply let go. We turned our canoe around and started paddling in our own direction, letting the current of their world drift away behind us. The first change was the phone calls. I stopped making them. For the first few weeks, my mother would call, her voice filled with a slightly wounded tone. "You're so busy these days, Fajar. You don't have time for your own mother anymore." "It's been a busy time at work, Boo," I would reply, my voice even, polite, and completely devoid of detail. It was the tone I used with a persistent but low-priority vendor at the office. The calls became shorter, then less frequent. I had turned myself into a conversational dead end. There was no conflict, no anger, nothing for her to latch on to. I had simply become boring. The weekend visits stopped. There was no announcement. We just didn't go. We filled our weekends with trips to the bookstore, visits to the public swimming pool, and long, lazy afternoons building block towers with Sari on our living room floor. We were building a new world, and its borders were the front gate of our rented house. About 3 months after the birthday party, we received an official-looking summons to a family meeting at the house in Bekasi. It was delivered by my brother, Dimas, who showed up unannounced, a smirking, resentful messenger. "Mama and Papa want everyone there on Sunday. It's important." I felt a weary premonition in my gut, but I agreed to go. Rina and I discussed it. This was not a social visit. This was an obligation. We would go, we would listen, and we would leave. We were no longer participants in the family drama. We were now reluctant spectators. When we arrived, the air was thick with a self-important tension. My parents were seated on the main sofa, like a king and queen holding court. Maya was there, looking particularly smug, with Rio glued to a new, even more expensive tablet. The meeting was about the house, the ancestral home. It was old, my father explained, in a long, rambling monologue. It needed significant repairs, a new roof, foundation reinforcement. The costs were substantial. I listened, my face a carefully constructed mask of neutral interest. I assumed the end game was to ask for money, and I had already prepared my polite, firm refusal. I had mentally rehearsed the lines. Rina and I have our own financial obligations. We cannot help at this time. But I was wrong. The reason for the meeting was far more brutal, far more final. "We have taken out a significant loan to cover the costs," my father announced, his chest puffed out with a strange, misguided pride. "But to secure this loan and to secure the future of this family's legacy, my mother and I have made a decision, a legal decision." He paused for dramatic effect. My mother looked at me then, a strange mixture of pity and resolve in her eyes. "Fajar," she said, her voice soft but firm, "you have your own life now. Dimas, well, he is Dimas. This house must be protected. It must stay with the family name." My father cleared his throat. "We have legally transferred the title, the Certificat Hak Milik, of this house to Rio's name. As he is still a minor, Maya will act as the official legal guardian and trustee of the property." The silence in the room was absolute. Rina, sitting beside me, made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. My brother Dimas just shrugged, a pathetic admission of his own irrelevance. I didn't move. I felt the words wash over me, not with the hot sting of anger, but with the cold, final clarity of a mathematical proof. This wasn't just about repairs. This was a coronation and a disinheritance in a single, brutally efficient act. They had taken the single most valuable asset of our family, the physical embodiment of our history and our parents' life's work, and handed it to their grandson. But worse, they had handed legal control of it to Maya, the incompetent, parasitic ex-wife who had proven time and again that she couldn't even manage her own life. They had not just chosen the grandson over the son, they chose the ex-daughter-in-law over their current one. They had looked at me, at Rina, and at our granddaughter Sari, and had legally, formally, and permanently written us out of the story. We were a dead branch pruned from the family tree to allow the real heir to flourish. Rina was shaking with silent rage, her hands clenched so tight her knuckles were white. My mother started to say something, a platitude about how this was for the best, how I would understand one day. I didn't let her finish. I stood up. I looked at my father, at my mother, at the smirking woman who now controlled my birthright, and I felt nothing. The void that had been forming inside me for months was now complete. The ice had finally reached my heart. There was no more pain. There was only calculation. "Thank you for the information," I said. My voice was calm, level. It was the voice I used at the end of a business negotiation when the terms were unacceptable. I turned to Rina. "Let's go home," I said gently. We walked out of that house, leaving the stunned silence behind us. As we drove away, Rina finally let her anger out, a torrent of righteous fury at the injustice, at the sheer, calculated cruelty of it. I listened, my hand steady on the steering wheel, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. I was no longer on the road back to Depok. I was on a new road, and the destination was a place so far away from that house in Bekasi they would never be able to find me again. That night, after Rina and Sari had slept, I stayed up late in our small living room. I didn't drink, I didn't rage. I opened my work laptop. For years at my job, I had seen the inefficiencies, the gaps in the market. I knew that the hundreds of office towers and industrial parks scattered across the city's vast periphery were ecosystems in themselves, constantly in need of reliable, trustworthy partners for everything from specialized office supplies to complex event logistics. It was an unglamorous, fragmented world, built on relationships and reputation. I began to type. I started to draft a business plan. It wasn't a dream of a glittering empire. It was a blueprint for a fortress of financial independence, built brick by brick with logic, hard work, and a complete and utter absence of sentiment. The son they had disinherited was dead. The businessman was born, and my first order of business was to close their account permanently. The day I resigned from my procurement job was the quietest, most significant day of my new life. There was no fanfare. I gave my 4 weeks' notice, trained my replacement with meticulous care, and on my last day, I packed my small box of personal items and walked out of the building for the last time. I didn't feel fear or excitement. I felt the calm, steady focus of an engineer who has just been given a complex problem to solve. The problem was my family's future security. The solution was the business plan on my laptop. I called my new company Solusi Mandiri, Independent Solutions. The name was a private declaration of intent. My office was the small third bedroom in our rented house, a room that had previously been used for storing things we never used. I sold my car, a decision that horrified my old colleagues, and used the money as my starting capital. My new mode of transport was a second-hand but reliable motorcycle. It was a visible downgrade to the outside world, but to me it was a symbol of liberation. Every drop of gasoline in its tank was an investment in my own future, not a contribution to a family that had written me off. Rena was my silent partner, my anchor. While she kept her own steady job, providing the stable income that kept us afloat, her belief in me was the unspoken fuel for my long nights. She never once questioned my decision. She saw the change in me, the new, hard light in my eyes, and she understood that this was not a whim. It was a matter of survival. My business model was simple and brutally effective. I wasn't selling a product. I was selling trust. As a procurement officer, I knew the biggest headache for any large company was the unreliability of their B2B suppliers. Deliveries were late, quality was inconsistent, prices changed without warning. I positioned myself as the solution. I became the ultimate middleman, the single point of contact that a company could trust to handle their non-core but absolutely essential operational needs. My first client was my old company. I knew their pain points intimately. I offered to handle the procurement of all their corporate printing and promotional materials. I knew the best, most reliable printers who were too small to get a corporate contract on their own. I consolidated the orders, guaranteed the quality, and ensured on-time delivery every time. I took a small margin for myself, and in return, I saved them a mountain of headaches. They signed a 1-year contract. From there, I expanded. I would ride my motorcycle to the sprawling, anonymous industrial parks and new office corridors on the western and southern fringes of the city. I didn't target the massive headquarters in the central business district. I targeted their operational hubs, the places where the real work got done. I offered solutions. A factory needed a reliable, last-minute provider for custom safety equipment. I found one. A new tech office needed a trustworthy partner to organize their launch event, from catering to audiovisuals. I handled it. My pitch wasn't sexy. It was, let me take this problem off your hands. It will be done right, on time and on budget, guaranteed. The first 2 years were a relentless grind. I was the CEO, the delivery boy, the accountant, and the janitor. My days were a blur of meetings, supplier negotiations, and navigating the chaotic traffic on my motorcycle, a slim briefcase of contracts strapped to my back. But every contract signed, every invoice paid was a brick in the fortress I was building around Sari and Rena. During this time, my old family barely registered. My monthly automated transfer for parental support continued, an emotionless transaction from a bank account they couldn't see into. My mother would occasionally call, her voice a plaintive whine. "We saw your cousin's new baby. They are so blessed. When are you and Rita going to give Sari a little brother, a boy?" "We are very happy with the family we have, Ibu," I would reply in my polite, customer service voice. "Is there anything else I can help you with today? I have another call coming in." I built a wall of professional pleasantries, so smooth and so high they could find no crack to climb. They knew nothing of my new business. As far as they were concerned, I was still a lowly office worker who had foolishly sold his car. This ignorance was a strategic advantage. It kept them at a distance. The breakthrough came in the 3rd year. A multinational electronics company I had been supplying with basic promotional materials was impressed with my reliability. They were launching a massive new product line, and their usual logistics partners were in disarray. They took a chance on me. They asked if Sulusi Mandiri could handle the complex logistics of assembling and distributing 10,000 dealer support kits to retail locations all across Java. It was a test, a monster of a project that was far beyond my current capacity. The old Fajar would have been terrified of failure. The new Fajar saw it as a calculated risk. I said yes without hesitation. I worked for 72 hours straight, calling in every favor I had, leveraging every relationship I had built. I rented a small warehouse, hired a dozen temporary staff, and personally oversaw the assembly line. Rena came every night after her own job, packing boxes alongside me, her silent presence a source of immense strength. We did it. We met the deadline. Not a single kit was late. Not a single item was missing. The client was stunned. The reward was a multi-year, multi-million rupiah contract to be their primary logistics and corporate solutions partner in the region. That was the day the fortress got its foundations. The motorcycle was replaced by a good, solid company car. We moved out of the rented house in Depok and bought our own, a beautiful, secure home in a quiet, leafy neighborhood in the south of the city, with a high wall and a garden where Sari could play safely. Rena was finally able to quit her job to focus on our daughter and help me manage the company's finances. The monthly income I was now drawing was more than I used to make in a year. We weren't wildly, ostentatiously rich. We were simply secure. Immovable, unshakable secure. One afternoon, Rena was overseeing the installation of a new security system at our house. A car pulled up to the gate. It was my mother. She had somehow found our new address. Rena buzzed her in, her face a mask of polite neutrality. My mother walked into our new, spacious living room, her eyes wide, taking in the quality furniture, the artwork on the walls, the quiet hum of prosperity. "Fajar," she breathed, looking around in disbelief. "We had no idea. You never told us." "You never asked," I replied, walking into the room. I wasn't angry. I wasn't happy to see her. I felt nothing at all. She was an unexpected variable in my day. Nothing more. "Your father and we are having some trouble," she began, the familiar whine creeping back into her voice. "Maya hasn't been responsible with the house. There are bills to pay." I let her talk,
listening with the same detached patience I would give to a client presentation. I already knew this would happen. Incompetence, like water, always finds its own level. Fajar, she finally said, her eyes pleading. You are our son. We are your parents. You have so much now. It's your duty to help. I looked at her, at this woman who was a biological stranger to me now. I thought of my daughter's face at that birthday party. I thought of my wife's tears. I thought of the cold refusal in my father's voice when our child was sick. I am fulfilling my legal duty, I said, my voice perfectly level. My monthly transfer is never late. As for the rest, my duty is to this house, to my wife, to my daughter. This is my family. I gestured around the room, indicating the world from which she had no part. Your arrangement is with Maya and Rio. Your legacy is in their hands. I wish you the best of luck with your investment. The cold, clinical finality of my words hit her like a physical blow. The hope in her eyes was replaced by a stunned, wounded confusion. She had come here expecting the dutiful son of her memory, and had found a stranger, a CEO of a life from which she was permanently excluded. End of Part 4.
My mother's visit was not the opening of a new chapter, but the epilogue of an old one. She left that day with the dawning, horrified realization that the emotional levers she'd always relied upon were now connected to nothing. Her pleas for duty, for blood, for a shared history, were met with the impenetrable, polite surface of a business transaction that had already been concluded. The encounter left no ripple in my life. The day after she visited was the same as the day before. I woke up, I shared breakfast with my wife and daughter, and I went to work building our world. The news from her world, however, began to filter through in fragments, passed along by distant, gossiping relatives. The fortress she and my father had built around their grandson, with Maya as its guardian, was proving to be made of sand. Maya, armed with the legal authority over a significant asset, was a disaster. She took out a second mortgage on the house, a secret she kept from my parents, to fund a failed attempt at an online clothing boutique. When that failed, she began selling off the original furniture piece by piece to maintain her lifestyle. My brother, Dimas, was useless, a ghost in his own family's drama, offering no support. The house in Bekasi, the proud symbol of their legacy, began to decay. The paint peeled. The garden grew wild. My parents, now in their late 60s, were living in a crumbling monument to their own bad decisions, their health beginning to fail under the weight of financial stress and the constant low-grade humiliation of being dependent on Maya's whims. The automated monthly transfer I sent them, which I had never increased, was no longer a supplement. It was their lifeline, a fact that must have tasted like ash in their mouths. My life, in contrast, was defined by quiet, steady growth. Solution Mandiri had become a trusted name in the corporate services sector. We employed nearly 30 people. We weren't a famous company. Our name wasn't plastered on any billboards, but we were deeply embedded in the operational fabric of dozens of successful businesses. My income was more than comfortable. It was secure. But the real wealth was measured in peace. It was measured in being able to afford the best health care when Sari got sick. It was measured in family holidays to Japan, where Rena and I could watch Sari's eyes light up with wonder, creating memories that belonged only to us. It was measured in the complete and total absence of manufactured drama. The final call came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was my cousin, his voice grave. Fajar, your father is in the hospital. He's had a serious stroke. The public hospital has done what they can, but your mother, she wants to move him. She wants him to have a private room, the best care. I was silent. I felt a faint, distant echo of a son's duty, a ghost limb twitching. They have no money, Jar, my cousin continued, his voice soft with pity. The house is so tied up with debt, they can't sell it. Maya won't help.
Dimas is nowhere to be found. You were the only one left. This was it. The final, desperate gamble. A medical emergency. The one event that is supposed to dissolve all grievances and bring a family together. And they were right to play it. A part of me, a deep, buried part, felt the pull. I did not go to the hospital. Instead, I made a few calls. I spoke to a doctor I knew, had him inquire about my father's condition. The prognosis was not good, but his situation was stable. The care he was receiving was adequate. The move to a private hospital would not change the medical outcome. It would only change the comfort, the prestige, the facade. It was the same story, told in a different, more desperate key. I thought about what to do. I could pay for it all. I could swoop in, the magnanimous, successful son, and solve their problems with a single bank transfer. I could buy their gratitude, their awe, their dependence. I could finally, definitively win the game. But the moment I thought that, I realized with chilling clarity I was no longer playing. Winning implies you care about the outcome, and I didn't. Their game, their rules, their drama, it was a foreign language to me now. To intervene would be to admit that I was still a part of their system, still bound by their expectations. I did not call my mother. I did not call my cousin back. I called my office. "Mira," I said to my assistant, "I need you to arrange something for me. I need a delivery of the highest-end fruit baskets and floral arrangements to be sent to the public hospital in East Jakarta. One to be delivered every morning for the next 2 weeks. Have the card say, 'Wishing you a speedy recovery,' with prayers, Fajar, and family. Also, please find the best home care nursing agency in the city. I want to prepay for 1 month of their top-tier 24-hour service to begin on the day the patient is discharged. Bill it all to the company's general expense account." It was the perfect solution. It was an act of impeccable, undeniable filial piety, executed with the cold, impersonal efficiency of a corporate strategy. I provided for my father's comfort and future care in a way that was both overwhelmingly generous and emotionally vacant. It offered them no access, no conversation, no hope of reconciliation. It was a gesture that was impossible to criticize, yet provided them with absolutely no emotional warmth. It was a final gilded brick in the wall between us.